In a world where many people see reality as a circle or a rectangle, the truth is that issues are cylinders. Rather than a two-dimensional understanding, we will flush out the three-dimension complexities through nuanced conversation and civil, respectable discourse to highlight all perspectives on controversial issues. I'm your host, William Roosh, a high school teacher who's trying to transform education as we know it. Welcome to the Anti-Echo Chamber. This is Cylinder Radio. Hello and welcome to the next lesson, the next installment of Cylinder Radio. Today, I don't know what the title is yet. We're going to figure it out. But I wanted to talk to someone I've known for a long time. And I've been in teaching for 15 years, and I've been at 3 schools full-time, 2 schools for student teaching. And I've never had an educational mentor. And even though I only worked with him for about maybe 2 years, and we weren't extremely close when it wasn't like a formal mentorship or anything. I was able, my first 2 years of teaching at full time, I was able to watch him in the classroom and kind of observe from a distance. And I learned a lot from him. So I kept in touch and I wanted to bring him on this podcast. And his name is Jim Dobkowski. And he is kind of a polymath. He's kind of has all this information that's just kind of been, accumulated over different careers and over time. And, he's an author and he's a writer, creator of Corporation U, which we'll talk about. And he's a high school science teacher still in the classroom now. And we talk on the phone from time to time. And you share just different tidbits of information that I use all the time as I'm trying to do my thing on social media and stuff. And I was like, let's just bring you on and have you kind of speak about it, because I use the stuff that you share with me, Jim, all the time. And I want to kind of introduce my audience to you and get them to, we can kind of have the conversation we would have had just over the phone on a public forum. So thank you for being here. Introduce yourself a little bit and we can just get into the conversation. Because before I was hitting record, we were just talking anyway. And I was like, well, let's just for the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm really nobody special. You were a wonderkind, like when you were at Nova. You were this young guy who just had these amazing ideas. And I think I just, every now and then, just sat you down and just tried to give you motivation, because it's so tough being a first year teacher. Like the first 3 years of teaching, I think, are the hardest. And you just handled it well. The students loved you. That Simpsons thing that you did,
the Simpsons
was mind blowing. Yeah. We were just kind of in the right place at the right time. When you said mentor, I had an amazing mentor who just recently passed away. His name was Lee Paslatina. So I need to get a shout out to him. On my blog, corporationu.com, Y-O-U for you, I wrote a piece for him. He was just way ahead of his time. And, it was really awesome just being able to pick up the phone and just go over certain situations. So he was the kind of guy that first brought university classes into a high school, and that's kind of how I got to know him. I got to know him my senior year. And one of the things that I remember most about Lee, besides the fact that he went from mentor to friend. Yeah. And I went from calling him Mr. Paslatina to Mr. P to Lee. But it took a very long journey for me to get to do that. It was my senior year, and I was doing an environmental project, like a political project. And we were trying to clean up a stream along my school. And it was like a week after graduation, if that. And I was running into some roadblocks. And he just looked at me and said, you're not a student here anymore. You got to solve it on your own. Yeah. And I remember being mad for about 30 seconds and then just almost being inspired by the fact that he was basically like, whatever I needed to teach you, I taught you. And I think that's something that's kind of missing in education today is stepping back, and allowing students to become adults and failing on their own and promoting failure. the one thing, my mantra in my classroom is biology is the greatest class there is, because you're allowed to be wrong. And that's what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis is just an educated guess. And I'm like, if you're getting it right, then you shouldn't be in this class. If your hypothesis every time we do an experiment is right, then I need to enroll you in a university or something like that. You're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah,
in fact, I want you to be wrong. Yeah. Like science is about being wrong. Science is about, I think this is the cure, or I think this will help. But if you have fear that you might be wrong, you're never going to solve any of the problems. So, and then when I ask a question and then I get silence, I'm like, guys, what's the rule here? You're allowed to be wrong. Let's go, man.
Yeah.
Gamble. But, what I see is, I see kids, like when they're coming into ninth grade, or even middle school, I don't know what has happened to them, but they lose that inquisitiveness, for lack of a better word. Like I look at my boys and I just see how inquisitive they are, and I share that with my kids, right? And there was this report that I read: if you give someone a paper clip, right, and you tell them, come up with X amount of ways that you could use this paper clip, and I forget what the number is, right? And I sent this to all my peers. Probably I should have been a little bit better prepared for this interview. So I think the number is, if you get over 50, you're considered a genius. So they gave this task to all elementary schools, K to 6. Guess how many kindergartners were considered geniuses? And this is the question I ask my students. What do you think? The percentage of kindergartens that were considered geniuses?
5%.
98.
Okay. Wow.
98% of kindergarten kids came up with more than 100 ways on how to use a paperclip.
Yeah.
Why? Because their minds are like wide open, right? And the example that I share with them is, we were driving one place, and I think we were going to my in-laws, right? My in-laws live in Gettysburg, so it's like a 6-hour ride. So you really have to be entertaining to be a parent on a 6-hour ride. And we try to cut back on the iPads. My kids don't even have cell phones yet. And so my youngest at the time might have been 4, and we're just, I'm a teacher, right? So I'm like, all right, Uncle Robert has 10 kids, right? So my older brother has 10 kids. Uncle Robert has 10 kids and he orders a pizza. And in New York, pizzas only have 8 slices. I mean, how many kids don't get a slice? So I'm asking this to my 4-year-old. It's like, why would Uncle Robert only order 1 pizza if he has 10 kids?
Yeah.
And why don't he cut it into more? And he had all these answers. 2 years later, same trip, same question. Now he's 6. He's like 2.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's the right answer. That was the answer I was looking for. But is it the right answer?
It's a right answer, right? Yeah. So I do. So I think there's so many levels to something like that. I just wrote down one of the things that you did help me with when it was my first year of teaching, is I was struggling with a kid. Still remember his name. I don't know. Kevin Hayes was his name. I don't know if you remember.
Okay.
But he was just being, and if he's out there, shout out, reach out to me. He's probably like 30-year-old man now.
Yeah, he's got to be, right? At least late 20s, early 30s.
But he was just, being like tough, and I was a first-year teacher. And I remember I went to talk to you, and I was like, this kid's really being an asshole, basically. And like, I wouldn't say that, but like, he's just being really tough and all this kind of stuff. And you were like, okay, well, you should have lunch with him every day this week, and then next week and the week after. And I was like, no, Jim, I don't think you're listening to me. I don't like him. And it's weird that I don't like my student. And you're like, you probably don't know him very well. And it was spot on. And now 15 years later, the first day of school, I pass around a calendar, and I have every one of my students sign up for a day, and I have lunch with a different student every day. And like, I think that's weird because I would never want to eat with my teachers, but
Mhm.
kids love it. And it makes me a better teacher, and it makes them a better student because they see that I actually care. They get my undivided attention for an hour, and I just talk to them about themselves. And that started, my first year of teaching, because the idea that if you don't like your students, and you've probably seen this too, it's really gross how many teachers don't seem to like their students. Like, if you don't like your students, you don't know them well enough. I love the Mary Lou Nowacki. She was actually a nun. A quote: "There isn't anyone you wouldn't love if you didn't hear their story."
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool, and I applied that.
No, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
I just wanted to get it out there. I'm not a perfect teacher, right? Like you probably emulate my principles better than I do, and yeah, I had students hate me. I've had students threaten me on MySpace and Facebook and all this other stuff. But here's the thing, and I don't think that they get. I always used to tell teachers, don't get mad at the kids. Like I'll discipline my kids, and I'm stern, and I have limits.
yeah,
But what's happening right now is you're trying to put a cloak on them of some sort, and they're maybe not used to it. So be upset at maybe their parents or the system or whatever. But you know, it's the one-on-one thing, and I still do it. I don't do it to your degree where that's a great idea, by the way, and I love it, and I might steal it.
yeah,
But kids that I am having troubles with, I'll actually bring them in. And we kind of have what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas conversation, because I'm like, hey, I have a reputation to teach, to keep, like, do not tell anybody I'm being nice,
right.
and they just kind of look at me. I've done it with kids who couldn't afford to go to the prom, and it's just like I have a persona. I'm in a school where there's not a lot of male teachers. There's 2 male high school teachers in my whole school. Teachers actually send me kids because
Yeah.
they're like, maybe they need a male influence. And there's this one kid, I won't say his name, say it's what's an odd name, I don't know.
Elmer.
Yeah, Elmer. One day the principal comes in after school, and we're talking, we're having a conversation. He looks to his right and he's like, Elmer, you've been here the whole time? And he's like, yeah, and he's doing his work and stuff. And principal turned to me and started calling me the Elmer Whisperer, like. And I think I just, like, these are my rules. I have the same rules I have with my kids. Um, if you want to go online, you got to get your work done first. Like, it's the consistency, I think, and not coddling them, but it is getting to know your students, especially the ones that are getting in a lot of trouble. Because kids get in trouble because they're vying for attention.
Yeah.
And when the attention doesn't, when it doesn't go away, that means that's when you have to step in and not be mean about it, not disciplining them. You actually have to go in the opposite direction. And I learned a lot of that just by being at Nova, the school that we worked in, because I was the part of the dean of discipline with Laura Stribling.
Yeah.
And you just kind of learn just from waiting for the teacher report to come that something is going on in this kid's life that unfortunately a teacher in a 40-minute time span doesn't have time to deal with, And I would have to say being a teacher and a dean of discipline at the same time just really changed my whole perspective of a teacher in a classroom. It's an experience I think everyone should have. I don't know how you would implement it, but every teacher needs to take a role, like a day, where they just sit in and they listen to these kids that are being sent down to the office.
Yeah.
And I've had kids, after they tell me their story, just turn to them and say, there's no way I would be able to be in a classroom right now if I was you. Like, you're my hero.
Right.
You're a superstar. Like, do you realize, like, the fact that you woke up today, got on a bus, and came here with all that stuff going on in your life? Like, that's, like, and I mean it.
Yeah.
Like, you hear, like, so you learn, right, from having lunch, like, what some of these kids are going through.
Yeah.
And then you'll discover that kid's a hero, man. That person is a superhero.
Yeah, I remember teaching in East LA, and there was a kid who, again, was just acting up, and I I was probably, it was like my 5th year teaching or something. And it was at a new school, and it was a tough school. It was really a tough school. It was heartbreaking. And I was like, I'm gonna call your parents and have a meeting. And he was just like, good luck. And it turned out his mom was in prison for murder, never met his dad. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with 7 people. And after you find that out, you're just like, thank you for coming here. I don't care that you were speaking up in class. Like, what am I doing? Like, thank you. You got out of bed. You came to school. You could have easily
Right.
come out of school. It just changes your whole perspective. And so I want to talk about that story, because I think that's great, the how many pizzas thing. I've said this to several people, and it's kind of working its way into all like the social justice stuff that I'm pushing back on and everything like that, is I don't feel like I fit in among a lot of educators. I don't feel like teachers are my people. And it's not like I'm better than, I just don't feel like I fit in. And I go to these professional development conferences and stuff, and I look around, I'm just like, these are not my people. And it's weird. It's like maybe that comes off as like snobbish, but it's actually the opposite. I feel like all of them would say 6 or say 2. I'm sorry. You know, how many slices left over, would say 2. And I would always be thinking about, you know, why not buy another pizza, or why not go get Chinese food or something like that. I just am all over the place, and I'm bad at that compliance element. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's something like, I've had some success in the profession, but I don't fit in, and I don't know what that is. I don't know why. Do you notice that teachers kind of fit a mold, a lot of teachers, or have you not seen that? Am I off on just my experiences?
I don't think you're off in a big school. I don't know how big the school is.
I've been at different ones. Yeah, the one now I'm at.
Yeah. I mean, and going back to my mentor, the thing that he like had me like put a hand on a Bible and swear on was, he's like, please stay out of the teacher's lounge. Whatever you do, stay out of the teacher's lounge.
My student teacher told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't listen to him. So like when I was doing my student teaching, like one of the stories I remember telling was, and you know, we were just talking about background stuff. Where do you come from? They were kind of interested in me. And I mentioned that I write, and, you know, and my goal, my dream, I had a lot of dreams, but they all kind of melded into one. But, you know, I wanted to be a screenplay writer.
Yeah.
And I wrote screenplays. I had screenplays optioned and blah, blah, blah. And that's one of the reasons I was out in California. So, and I mentioned Joe Esterhaus at the time, right? So Joe Esterhaus was the guy. He was the screenplay writing guy, and he's who I wanted to be. And I think at the time, I forget what screenplay he wrote, but you know, he got, you know, a couple of million or something. And the person turned to me that I was talking to and said, "Oh my God, he gets paid that much money? That's not even important. He gets that much money to write a screenplay? What we do is important. That's not important." And I said, "You just realized that you just told me like what I really want to do in life is not important. Like teaching was my backup plan." And it's that kind of mentality. Now, I would have to say the teachers that I work with now don't have that. I'm in a really small town, in a really small community, and for the most part, we have to wear so many hats in a small school that we do get jaded and we do get frustrated. But I don't have that sense of like my job is better than your job. I'm better than you. And I see that in big schools, and I don't know what causes that. And as teachers get older too, I notice they get frustrated because, you know, like as you teach, you get good at what you do. And then some young person comes in and it's like, "Hey, we have this new program we want you to do." And I get it. They're new and they're fresh and they have all these ideas, but they've seen so many new programs that didn't work as they were teachers. It's really hard to get them to jump on board. But for the most part, you know, except for when I was doing my student teaching, and then I did a year on Long Island where I actually went to the teacher's cafeteria, and they were like ripping apart um, Megan Kelly at the time.
Oh yeah,
And this was before her blackface comment and stuff like that. Just saying how stupid she was, and going on and on and on. And I've been on the Megan Kelly show.
Okay.
I've met Megan Kelly. I don't know like her personal life or anything like that, but when she found out that I was a teacher, she was just more than respectful and of our profession, and it's amazing what you do. And she took time and talked to me afterwards, um, and that's why I was on. I was on as a teacher, but she didn't know I was the teacher in the crowd until after we talked to her. I was on a panel, um, but I'm sitting there thinking she so admires teachers, right? And then I'm in this group of people who've never met her, that are just tearing her apart just because she's on the Fox network or whatever. Um, so I went like for 2 days, and then I was like, Lee was right, man. And that was the school that he actually taught in.
Oh, okay.
And it was my high school, which was weird in a sense of, going back and just teaching for a year.
Yeah.
But you look at Nova, right, where we met,
Mm-hmm.
it was small, right? And everyone, everyone had skin in the game.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we worked together. And then I went to another small school, even though it was a Burbank school system.
Mm-hmm.
I was in their alternative school, their community day school, which was, next step prison.
Right.
And there was a small staff, and the same thing, everyone had skin in the game. Although I did see a little bit more of the, I don't know, the and I hate to use this term, but the union rules type of thing, like, the union says we can do this, the union says we can't do that. So like I had a garden at CDS, and most of my students had judge appointed service that they had to do. So I arranged it that on Saturdays they could do their judge appointed service in the garden, but I couldn't let the union know because it was a Saturday after school and I wasn't getting paid for it. And teachers there were some of them, when they were asked to do something extra, I would be like, okay, but they would be like, nah, union contract, can't do it. I don't see that much of it where I'm at now, for the same reason, small school, and everyone has more than one role. I mean, I teach every age group because I teach chemistry, biology, and AP. Nobody teaches just one subject.
Yeah.
We teach a whole bunch of things. So we kind of realize like we have to work together. So like before I get ninth graders, I sit down with the science teacher who has taught all the middle school kids, and we go through student by student, even to like, where should I sit them?
Yeah.
Not, I look at their IEPs, but I'm like, you're better than an IEP. Like, and then she's, and you learn things like, don't sit this student next to this student because they'll talk the whole time. And this student has family problems. So presently, I don't really see that. Politically and socially, I mean, I don't really gel with other teachers. I mean, I lean to the right. Most teachers don't. I go to church every Sunday. A lot of teachers don't.
Right.
And I understand my faith. Like, I would probably take the same approach you did, right? So I'm Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic.
But you're also interested in science, right?
Yeah, and then you discover, well, so did the church. I mean, the Big Bang Theory was a Catholic priest, right? And that when you really delve into Galileo, there's more to Galileo than, they were anti-science. And you realize that Copernicus who was, some people say was a priest, some people didn't, but he was a very religious person. He came up with the same theory before. There's a lot. You learn to look at the layers, right? And then you just kind of, you question it. Like, I've questioned my faith my whole life.
Yeah.
And, if there's any biblical character that I'm probably most like, it's Thomas, right? So like, you gotta show me, or not even show me. Like, that's a Missouri type of thing. Like, I need to prove it to myself. that this is where this belief came from, right? And that just kind of stems back from an experience that I had in college where I was a freshman and I went to a Bible study, which, like, for Catholics, that's like, whoa, right? Bible study. And I went in, and I'll never forget it. The guy's name was John Higgins. It was right down the hall from me. And I'm like, when's everybody else showing up? And he's like, they're not. And I'm like, why? And it's like, because you're here. And I'm like, me? Like, I don't even know these people. How did I offend them? He's like, oh, because you're Catholic. And I'm like, okay. And so I grew up in a predominantly Catholic neighborhood. I had 1 or 2 Protestant friends, right? Everyone else went to my church. We all went to catechism together, which necessarily isn't a good thing because you just don't actually expand your knowledge. So he starts telling me all the stuff about Catholicism, which blew my mind. I didn't know we were such bad, evil people, and our theology was so off the whack. And
there's a lot of people who are listening who don't even know that Catholics and Protestants are like they don't, like, that's like not aware to a lot of people now.
Yeah. Just go on YouTube, man. It's like religious wars on YouTube. So literally, I just thought, yeah. So I didn't disbelieve him. I'm like, well, I can't belong to this faith if everything this person is telling me is true.
Right.
And then you're like, then I got to save my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad, like, you know. And then I just kind of started researching Catholicism, and I just kind of learned, you know, what's right and what's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I think in that aspect, I differ from my peers because that's where we were going.
Yeah.
I don't really socialize with a lot of teachers. I don't really socialize with a lot of people in general. It's probably where I live today. I think I just got burnt out. I was, you know, extremely active in politics and in teaching and stuff like that. And once I started having a family, I just decided to kind of withdraw from life in general. But you know, I've been to their weddings, and, you know, I had one teacher that takes my boys out to lunch because she enjoys their company and stuff like that. So, but I understand where you're coming from, you know. I do. And it's just basically the warning that I got before I became a teacher, and the experience that I got in, you know, when that person was telling me that dreams aren't important, teaching is important. And, you know, I don't know why that infuses into teaching. The great teachers don't care what they get paid.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's not, I don't even know what I get paid, to be honest with you. My wife does. It's just something that I enjoy doing. I'm kind of good at it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of benefits and payoffs from just being a teacher.
It's an incredible job. And I guess where I get frustrated is there's like, you know, we're supposed to be lifelong learners. Kids aren't going to want to learn from someone who, you know, if you feel like you have it all figured out, because no one does, but, you know, constantly pursuing that. But, you know, so everyone says this like mouthpiece, like, you know, oh, teachers are the best. They should be getting paid more than athletes and actors and you know, oh, you're a teacher, you're one. But yet when the rubber hits the road, I don't see that. I don't see the deep respect for teachers in a lot of things. And then that probably goes on to me too. If I'm at some sort of event and, you know, it's like my wife's in the beauty industry. So it's a bunch of like the husbands who are just like around because their wives are or something. The husbands all to get together. What do you do for a living? You know, I'm an attorney, or, you know, I work I'm, you know, middle management, and then I'm always embarrassed when I say I'm a school teacher. Like, it just doesn't have the respect. You know, I've talked to people from like the Scandinavian countries, and it's like a respectful thing, and it doesn't have that here. Have you ever felt like embarrassed to say that you're a teacher?
No.
You have more self-confidence than I do. Like it's like, I don't have, like, I'm just like, wow, like I'm selling myself short. And then I make myself like, oh, should I tell them that I'm like a professor? Cause that's like, but I don't know. It's really not respected, especially I feel like among men, to say that, yeah, I'm a school teacher. Like, I think that people are trying to push those movements, but it feels like it just doesn't come up naturally. I don't know why. Why do you think that is? Not just like my psychology, but like, I don't think I'm the only one that sees it that way.
I don't know. Um, I I don't want to project this on teachers, but it goes back to that one person who said, "Well, what they're doing isn't even important."
Yeah.
When I was in, and I think that's what happens. Maybe a lot of teachers they come out and they're like, no, I am a teacher and my job is important, and stuff like that. You see it on Facebook when teachers self promote themselves or self promote their profession. Um, I think that bothers people. Right, I really do.
Like
Um,
you have to tell people that you're important. Like, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
like and plus, well, maybe all sorry, but I think maybe also is when I was in school, my teachers, I did not have a single teacher who like made an impact on me. The people that made an impact on me were like coworkers, friends, like, like it wasn't school teachers. So I didn't look at school teachers as anything that was respectful or like
hmm,
respectable or anything that I would ever want to be. So so maybe it's just like because of my personal experience. If I would have had a great teacher, then maybe I would have looked at it differently too.
yeah. See, I did. I mean,
Yeah.
I can go back to. I mean, all the way back to my kindergarten teacher, Miss Galuccio, who taught me about gravity, right? Miss Jensen, who in first grade, I used to run away from school. I hated school. And what she endured, like, I went to my mom recently. I'm like, first off, I don't even know if she's still alive, but I'm like, I feel like I need to write her a letter. Like, as a parent now of a kid who hates school, thank you, man. Like, I literally used to run away from school. Mr. Green, my sixth grade teacher, I mean, we read Ulysses, and like still to this day, I can't. If I make a mistake in pen, I have to use one neat line to kind of cross it out because that's what civilized people do. Like,
Wow.
but respect that, but the teachers who are great, um, they asked a lot of you, but they respected
Mhm.
you, right? So, and so I brought that with it. I think there's a political divide too with teachers. I mean, I think one of the things that get teachers in trouble, um, I'll take when I was in California, just
Yeah.
so we don't have to get involved in this present political situation. Um,
Yeah.
so like from the teachers union, I was getting like catalogs of political campaigns against. It was Obama McCain at the time, right? And one of the things that I thought was ridiculous was one of the things that the teachers union was against McCain about was the um, what is it, privatization of Social Security.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know if you're in a public school in California, but you don't pay Social Security if you're a teacher in the California unions because it's privatized. So how can that be a campaign issue, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I just rolled it over. Like when I moved to New York, I'm like, man, I have all this money in California. I forgot all about it. Like last year or 2 years ago, we just rolled it over. It's mine. I could do whatever I want with it. That was awesome. But yet, as a teacher, I have to pick a side now, and I that takes away from teaching. I think if the teachers union moved out of the political realm and then just worried about um, making teachers better,
Yeah.
it would be more of a positive thing. And I think that's some of the things. So you already lose at least a third of the people because of, and I'm just guessing. I'm just going with a third is extremely left, a third is extremely right, and maybe there's a third of the people in the middle. So you already lose a third of the people that are like, I don't like you because your union represents all these things that I'm against.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, I know my teachers went on strike. Um, Maybe they did get involved politically and I just missed it. I don't know. I don't know. But they didn't ask people to pick sides.
That's an issue that when all the George Floyd, I'm not going to go into it too much, but the George Floyd stuff was happening. It was a big thing among educators to promote Black voices and read Black literature and stuff. And I was like, I'm down. I'm down. So are you going to read Ta-Nehisi Coates and Thomas Sowell? And they were just like, well, no. Like, no, like it wasn't about Black voices. It was a very specific kind of Black voice. And I really went off on a couple of teachers who were like, like influential teachers on my social media. And I was like, guys, why are you not promoting any kind of, center, right of center, or right-wing Black voices? And one of the teachers actually said to me, like, well, are they saying anything different? I was like, yeah.
Different from what?
Yeah, like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, they're like, John McWhorter is saying that he feels that anti-racist movements of like the 21st century are extremely damaging to the Black community. Yeah, I'd say that's different. So like, let's talk about this stuff. And, I want to get more thinkers. Like, just saying that there's two slices left, to stick with that metaphor, because I really like that, is like, that's one kind of thinker, but what other kind of thinkers are there? And we need great thinkers in the classroom. And I don't know if that's where they're going all the time, because what I'm seeing a lot, and not from like, I work with a lot of really awesome people, and, it's just all the disclaimers and stuff like that. I'm just kind of speaking generally, but, like thinking your way through these problems, like we don't have it all figured out. Teaching seems like a really important job. And I do want to get into, you also sent me an article about policing and about getting people who are, thinkers and what kind of people are we getting into policing? I mean, I would say that education and policing are two pretty important, structures in society that we should be very thoughtful about how we approach who fills those roles. And I don't know if we're doing that. I don't know if the people who are in the classroom are necessarily the ones who are always the best, and the people who are behind the badge are always the best. What was the specifics of it? It had to do with IQ and
yeah, I
right?
forget the law case, but I believe it happened in the 90s.
Yeah, it was in New York, right?
It was in Connecticut.
Connecticut.
The law case, but I believe it's a standard, because a lot of the municipalities use, just like teaching, we apprentice, right? So a lot of the municipalities use the same testing system. And it was a guy who was dinged. He lost points and didn't get the job because his IQ was too high. And the argument was that policing is
let me just repeat that, because people who are listening, you heard that right. He got denied because his IQ was too high.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah.
So he sued.
Yeah.
Right. And the argument is it's a civil servant job, and they put they invest a lot of money into training you, and policing can be tedious, which that part makes me laugh, because like half the shows I watch are like NCIS, and half the interesting shows that are not tedious are police shows. Policing is the scientific method. That's what I tell my students all the time. I'm like, you want to be a good cop? Listen in my class. It's a scientific method, man.
Yeah.
Policing is the scientific method. Anyway, I digress. So he sued for discrimination. Like, I'm being discriminated against because I'm smart. And I'm not saying that police officers aren't smart,
right?
But people with, let's be honest. If you have a higher IQ, you're smarter than the average bear. All right. Like, my wife has a 148 IQ. She's smarter than me. Yeah. I'm sorry. She is. Yeah. So, and not just because she's my wife, is because she has a 148 IQ, and sometimes she looks at something and I'm like, yeah, okay, I don't get that, but good for you. So he sued and he lost. Now I think the lawsuit was in like 96 or 98. I came aware of it because I was a press secretary at the time for a high level politician. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall. Now, I didn't see it as them dumbing down the police force. I saw it as they're looking for followers,
compliance,
and not people who could think outside the box. Because your great cops are the ones that think outside the box. Serpico and all the good shows. When police forces, for whatever reason, kind of got into a rut, there was always somebody there. Bo Dietl. I worked for a guy who was a former detective who actually was partners with Bo Dietl, and he used to share stories with me. And like, one of the reasons why he retired is But I saw it as, man, we're going to start having a police force where these guys don't question authority. And maybe it was my black helicopter mentality. That was my fear. And then you kind of look at what's been happening since COVID hit, where, like a lot of cops are just not questioning some of the legislation that's being put forward by our elected officials, like, arresting that woman who was just cutting hair.
Right.
I don't think that would have happened 30 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong,
well,
but
or even even how to restrain people. Like it's possible. Like I looked up some of the laws in Minneapolis for how to restrain, and actually putting your knee on the neck of someone who's not compliant is part of like the procedure. So Derek Chauvin, what he did is so clearly gross and wrong, and he might have been following procedure, but I don't know what his IQ is. I'm guessing not 148. And so he was not going to say, wait a second, I don't know if I should be putting my knee on this guy's neck. He's probably just complying, just kind of following, just being a sheep, doing what he's told.
And sadly,
to some degree,
Rodney King, those cops were following procedure. It was explained to me, like my guy I went to high school with, right? It's kind of weird. You go to high school with people and they become like these huge people, right? So he's on Long Island. He's one of like the top cops, but he was just a regular police officer at the time, and he was moving up the ranks. And he was like, that couldn't happen in New York because our procedures are different. But in LA, apparently they had a compliance procedure, and they can't put handcuffs on you until you comply. He's like, we're in New York, which now has been getting crazy because of the stranglehold. He's like, we would have tackled Rodney King and put handcuffs on him for everybody's safety. But he said the reason that they kept on hitting him with clubs is Rodney King was supposed to comply. He was supposed to put his hands behind his back. Catch-22 is every time you get hit with a club, you go to stop that club. You're not, like.
Yeah.
So it's you need those high IQ people to be in a training room and just kind of raise your hand and say, excuse me, how is he going to put his hands behind his back if we're hitting him with billy clubs?
Yeah, well, like that. Like one of my hobby is, well, I can't do it now because it's the opposite of social distancing, but it's jujitsu. So it's grappling and strangles and joint manipulation and stuff like that. And it's a martial art. And when they say, hey, we have to do a nationwide ban on chokeholds, I am thinking that is the opposite. No, what you need is someone who knows how to choke people, because if I need to stop someone who's bigger, stronger than me, whatever, the number one thing that I do is I'm not going to punch them. I don't want them to, lose teeth or a black eye, and I don't want to get into fisticuffs, but I can get on someone's neck pretty quickly, and because it's my hobby, and choke them to a point where they could be unconscious in 6 seconds or something like that, and then I just let go. And they start breathing. I've been put out several times by chokes, and I just get up and I feel a little embarrassed and I'm fine. But so it's not, chokeholds are not a bad idea. It's the training on how do you apply a chokehold? What does that feel like? And I have thousands of hours on the mat of trying to grab people's necks that I know exactly what to do and what not to, but they're just, it's just like, they're not thinking their way through this. Oh, well, that guy was strangled, so get rid of chokes. It's like, you're thinking like checkers. Like, you got to think your way through this. And that's just like another example of someone who is, proficient in jujitsu would say, no, don't get rid of chokeholds, but no one there seems to be, or no one who's in power seems to be.
Well, going back to being a press secretary, politicians don't make decisions based on high IQ either, right? So they don't even have to take a test to run for office, and a lot of it is emotional. I mean, as a press secretary, I could tell you that there's a difference when I was promoting a story, if I wanted it on television and in the press, like written media. I knew which stories would make television, which stories wouldn't make television, just by the way stories are told. Right? So, I remember the guy that I worked for put in legislation that saved the county like $1.5 billion. Right? It was like this crazy thing. He found a loophole. Him and another legislator, they're both businessmen, and they were reading this New York state legislation, and they're like, holy cow, if we don't do this by such and such a date, we're not going to get all this money. And they plugged this hole. as a politician or as a press secretary, you're like, that should be on the front page. Nobody covered it. So I talked to one reporter and I said, hey, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to have my boss, we're going to pull that legislation. We're going to let the county go into $1.5 billion, and then we're going to rescue it. And he's like, that's a story. Right? So we're kind of caught up in that as well. So politicians they know this stuff, right? And that's one of the reasons I kind of got out. Was it was kind of scary for me that I learned very quickly on how to manipulate the press. I mean, one of the reasons I was kind of so popular was I would sit down with a reporter, and I remember the first time I did it, I understood the story, and I said, okay, this is our point of view. This is their point of view. This is what they're going to say about us. This is what we're going to say about them. And you should probably talk to that person over there because they don't agree with either one of us. And I remember the reporter looking at me like, you really want me to talk to that? Yeah, I'm like, yeah. And this is what they're going to say. And I'm going to disagree with it. I'm just trying to save you some time. You have press time, right? You got to. And
did she recognize like the game that you were just basically saying it's like a game. They're going to pitch at me. I'm going to try and swing this bat. They're going to was she aware that that's the way the game was played, or
she didn't until she talked to the person that I told her to talk to. And that person said what I said he was going to say. And then I remember the reporter coming up to me and said, wow, you were right. And I'm like, yeah, it's not my job to lie to you. Right. I'm the press secretary. I didn't go into it to spin. I'm not a spin doctor. But he's a spin doctor, and that's how this person's going to spin it, you know? And I grew a credibility because of that. In fact, after his position was over, the opposing party actually asked me to stay, which was nice. I just didn't want to do it anymore. But I think that's part of the problem too. Is everyone? It's a game. It's a huge, huge game, and that's why people are in the street, because people are tired of being pawns in a game. And these politicians, I don't know. I don't know if they get caught up with it. I don't know if they get lost. It's nice being in service, but you can't do it for a really long time because you get jaded. You really, really get jaded.
Well, those are important things too. Like I heard, I forget someone. Well, maybe it was one of the Weinstein brothers talking about there's been an affirmative action of idiots in media, academia, and politics. And I don't know if that's fair, if it's idiots, but there is, when you say I'm not a spin doctor, but there are people who are manipulating this. And you're a press secretary. I don't know where to go for honest media now. I really don't. So what I do is I try to consume it all, and I try to follow individuals. I like Matt Taibbi, so I follow him, not Rolling Stone, but him as a person, and try to hold him to some sort of standard. But this is what I'm saying is I wish we had more people who were free thinkers in teaching and really pushing the idea of failure and let's screw up and let's screw up ourselves and let's kind of work our way through this, try and figure out what's true or not. And, all that stuff. And police, let's get people who are innovators and thinking about but that goes for all of these institutions. All of them are the best, are the people teaching whatever, chemistry at, the top universities. Are they the best? Maybe not. I think they definitely used to be, but I don't know if they are anymore. Are people in these positions, these really important positions in politics, academia, and media, because they've had they know the game, they play it? I don't know. I'm seeing we're losing. The people who are in charge of these things are not necessarily the people who we would want to be there, clearly, because there is real civil unrest right now.
And the sad thing is the people that you want to be in it leave.
Yeah, they don't want to.
I think
who would want to be a good cop right now? It's I'm out. No, right. Get that.
And even politicians. I mean, why would you want to? I mean, and I remember being in it. My boss had eyes on being governor, and just just people I was surrounded by. And, I always used to joke, I'm like, hey, I finally have a title that's longer than my last name. But there was a humility that I brought with it just because, um, I grew up in a blue collar town, and I remember the thing, like one time I was asked to run for an office, and I did okay. I took second, and in a three party
the
race,
office?
Suffolk County Legislature,
Okay.
and that's how I got involved in politics. That's a long story, and it was actually almost a lark how I got the nomination. Um, the day I got a check from my Uncle Vinny, I cried. I might do it now because he was broke, and he sent me a check for $100, and I was like, wow, people believe in us. Like, people believe in these politicians that are running, and I took that to my press secretary. Like, that's who I'm working for. I'm working for my friends. I'm working for everybody who thinks this system's not a game. And as much as people want to rip down George Washington's statue, this is the one thing that we have to respect George Washington for. He left.
Yeah.
He gave the example for everyone to follow him that this is not a career. And every president up till FDR honored that. I mean, and as much as you want to not like Teddy Roosevelt, he could have kept on going, but he said as soon as he took over for was it McKinley?
Yeah, McKinley died. Yeah.
He said he's going to count McKinley's term as my first term, and all his political advisors were like, "Dude, you just threw away four more years." But everyone saw the Washington example as this is not a career, and that's why it's kind of sad that we're ripping down his statues, because that's the one lesson that we need to learn from George Washington. As whatever his past was, he kind of stepped forward when it was really important to step forward, and that should be elevated. So take this guy with all these flaws, and he's in charge of this young country, and he could have been king, right? Yeah. Or at least president forever. 8 now, and I guess his line was at John Adams' inauguration, and I'm paraphrasing, and it was something like, "I wonder who's happier now, me or you." Like, he, like he definitely had enough. But if we elevate George Washington just for that one thing, maybe we can then apply that to all our politicians who are just in there for like 40 years.
Yeah. Well, in his farewell address too, the thing that resonates with me is be careful of factions, because these political parties are going to tear our country apart.
Yeah. So, and to tell you the truth, I don't care about any other politician. You want to, don't like their statue or not. But there is something about that one move that was so American. And basically what it says is there's people besides me that are important, and let's give everyone a chance, right? Open the door for the next guy. And that can go for immigration, that can go for social justice, that can go for everything. But when you just point out the bad things that he did and remove that one message, then we lose that message. And that's the sad part. I think about George Washington. Now, I'm not a big George Washington fan, and I don't get bent up over statues and stuff like that. And, but I think he's an important person.
Yeah,
we need to point that out one lesson.
Yeah, well, if we're going to promote that it's important to be able to fail and let's not coddle people, and I don't know if you read the Jonathan Haidt book, Coddling of the American Mind, but people have been coddled. They don't go out, kids don't go outside and play in the streets anymore because they're about kidnapping. But if you look at the data on kidnapping, it's actually very rare. And people are just being so, coddled and they're not able to. So what that does then is it makes their mind very fragile, and they can't deal with like alternative points of view. And again, that's another thing that I'm just not seeing enough in the classroom is real critical thinking. Like, being critical in the real way of, let's read this. Is this good or not? Not just like, read this. This is amazing because it's Melville. So you have to love Melville. And it's
Right.
like, why? Like, why do I, like, just asking the question why? One of the things that I tell my students all the time is like, if you don't connect what we're learning in this class to your life, or you don't think that this is going to help you, then ask me. And if I can't answer that, or another teacher can't answer that, and sometimes my colleagues are a little annoyed because my students go out and they're like, wait, why are we learning calculus? And they don't have a good answer. But like, how can you, this is your life. How are you not able to explain the importance of advanced math? Like, there's a lot of importance to advanced math, or problem solving, or in English, like being able to communicate. Like, there are really important, these are important skills, but it's, again, I think even the teachers are just like, I'm going to do these state standards. I'm going to do it this way. And then blah, 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 blah. And they're not thinking about, a 16-year-old doesn't care. A 16-year-old is not thinking about how, they're thinking, I'm going to do this so I can get into college, so I can get a job, so I can get a cubicle, so I can get this, so I can get an Audi someday. As opposed to like, learning this right now will help me in this way. And so that's the lack of pushback that we allow kids to do, the lack of connection. I think of teachers as translators. Mm-hmm. Like, let me explain this concept in a way that you can apply to your life and make your life better. And I don't hear enough of critical thinking. And
I think one of the tough things is, right, you teach social studies and I teach science.
Yeah.
And even though, like, in New York, we have the Regents, right, which is like a final at the end. And they're really not that hard. The standardized tests are in math and in English, most of them. And those are all rule-based, right? You have to, like, how to write. Math, I always say that's the real science. Like, 2 + 2 is always 4. But that's the tricky thing about it, is like, you can't say it's not 4. So I guess it's easy for us to kind of pick on those guys because mm-hmm. we don't have, our kids can expand and be wrong. They can't. And then it's the administration, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at those standardized tests, and they're looking at how well they're doing at that. Now, New York's trying to change, right? So they're trying to change the way that we teach science, which it's really not going to affect me because I teach it, I do everything that we're supposed to be doing. But I don't know how it's got to be so brutal for math teachers and English teachers at times. I think one of the things that happens too in English that I noticed is teachers get connected to something that they love.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So you talk about Melville. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't get through Moby Dick. Right. And I like reading, and it was horrible. So when I talk to young teachers, and I was thinking about actually writing a book by this title, I'm like, you got to teach like you just don't care. And they kind of look at me, and I'm like, not that you don't care about the kids or anything like that. You got to stop being attached to your subject. Like, you could express how much you enjoy it, but when they tell you it sucks, you can't get hurt by that. So now let's go back to Nova, where you started. We had a lot of young teachers there, and they were struggling. And I kept on telling our principal, Diane French, I'm like, we don't have bad teachers. We have teachers that are too emotionally connected to their subject. Let's pick 1 week and I'll write lesson plans up for science, have the math teacher write up lesson plans, and everyone's going to teach outside their subject for one reason and one reason only: to prove that you're a good teacher and you're getting emotionally attached to your content. Now, the catch-22 for me is, like, I'm not emotionally attached to biology. I find it interesting and intriguing. There's one thing I teach the whole year. It's a short story called Thinking Like a Mountain. And I even tell the students, like, hey, listen, if you don't like this, don't tell me, because it's actually going to hurt my feelings, right? So pretend that you like it. But it's a story about, like, how you're supposed to think as an ecologist. But that's one of the things that I noticed. And I think teachers they have to present the stuff. They have to show how they love it. But if a kid doesn't love it, don't get offended by it. It's nothing that you're doing wrong. And there's nothing wrong with that kid. Like, I love Breyer's vanilla ice cream with the little brown nuts in it and stuff. My wife likes Rocky Road. I'm not offended by that. And that's how I think teachers have to start presenting their stuff.
Or explain it. Like, you know Colin Quinn, the comedian?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that guy.
He's great, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard him say one time, like, he's like, for comedians and stuff, he said, if you think something's funny, it is funny. Our job is to explain why it's funny.
Hmm.
And I think that could be another element of that as well, is if a teacher does love Melville, maybe you're just not explaining your connection to it well enough. And like it's like those comedians that get up there and that's just like, oh, well, you had to be there. It's like, no, that's your job, is to explain what it was like to be there. And that's what the great comedians do. And I think maybe that's what the great teachers who are passionate can do, is bring you into not just have kids show your like, oh, wow, he's really passionate. That means it's contagious, but just connecting those dots as well of here's what this means on a grand scale. And I think that's, another way that teachers might be able to not completely, divorce themselves, but also just like try that. I don't know.
Yeah. And, when you talk about teachers having to be the best, I grew up in a baseball family. Mm-hmm. And my dad always used to say, Ted Williams, greatest hitter in the world, couldn't teach hitting. Like, he tried it, failed. Because he was, and I remember I was looking like, why, Daddy? Because what he did came naturally. He goes, Walter Alston. My dad was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, or a Dodger fan. It's like, Walter Alston never made it out of the minor leagues. Greatest manager ever, right? And ironically, growing up in New York, I grew up not a Dodger fan, but with the Dodger lore. Tommy Lasorda, right?
Yeah.
He calls himself the second greatest lefty in Dodger history because he was on the same team as Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax got called up to the pros, and Tommy Lasorda didn't. Tommy Lasorda was an awesome manager. Sandy Koufax, right? He shows up for spring training every now and then. Yeah. Probably he can't teach greatness, but if you've struggled to learn something, I think that's what makes you a great teacher.
Getting back to the failure, right?
Getting back to the failure.
Learn basketball from LeBron. Oh, you just jump 5 feet in the air and throw the ball.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. That's it. Yeah. No problem. Right. So, and I'm sure LeBron understands the fundamentals and all this other stuff and can kind of pass it along. But Pat Riley was actually a good player as well, but he wasn't a superstar. Right. So I find I'm a good teacher. Like, when I started teaching chemistry, I didn't take a chemistry class in like 10 years. And I had to relearn it again. And I started doing the homework like I was assigning my students.
Yeah.
And I would get a question wrong. And I'm like, what? And then I would realize my mistake. And then when I'm going over the work with the student, I'd be like, hey, did you do such and such? And they're like, yeah, how'd you know? Yeah. I'm like, well, I said, well, trying to do this. I said, I do the homework I assign so I don't get rusty. But I'm like, sometimes when you're doing homework and you got a 5-year-old kid climbing on your back and you're not paying attention, I'm like, what, do you have your iPad on or something? They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's like having a 5-year-old climbing on your back. Yeah. I'm like, you make a silly mistake. Here's your silly mistake. So I think that's the thing too, is politicians don't get that. Like, they're constantly. Yeah. I did a tour in Manhattan East in New York City, in East Harlem, and there was a guy there was a retired surgeon who was trying to teach middle school. Guy was brilliant, and I used to sit in the back of his class and observe him, and I stole a lot of the stuff that he does.
Yeah.
Like with journaling and all this other stuff, and the kids just couldn't relate to him. They just couldn't get him. And I would sit there and like, some of these kids are gonna in college look back and say, "Wow, I blew this opportunity."
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think someone who's great in their profession make a great teacher. That doesn't mean that you can't do it, right? And I think some of the problems too with education is like, I have a friend who is a world-renowned composer. He Wedding Singers was the first movie he ever composed, and his movies have made billions of dollars. He can't teach in high school because he never got out of college. He quit after his junior year because he said they couldn't teach him anything anymore because he's a musical genius. He was going to quit after his senior year, but his wife was a year older than him, so he waited until she graduated. He's my age and retired, living a good life and stuff. If he wanted to go teach in a high school, he couldn't. Right. So that's, I think, a problem, something that we have to kind of reconsider. I wanted to teach AP government because when I went, I teach AP, and I took an AP class on, everything I needed to know. And it was a break. And I sat in on the lecture for AP government, and I went over everything that they had to teach. And I said, man, if I took I said, I'd done everything on that wall or on that smart board or whatever, except for like constitutional study, which I understand the Constitution, but I said, I'd probably need to take a class. So I went in and I said, hey, how can I teach AP government? And they're like, well, what are you here for? I'm like, oh, I'm here for AP biology. And they're like, well, why do you want to teach AP government? I'm like, well, I was a press secretary. I ran campaigns. I ran congressional campaigns. I was in part of writing legislation. One of the issues I was in went national. I was going on, and they were like, well, you're going to have to go back to college and get a degree in government or whatever. I'm like, why? I've done everything. My principal basically told me, like, hey, if you want to, if we have an opening, I'll let you do it, but New York State was against it. And then, you take the difference, I think, between social studies and like science. To teach biology, it's one certification. Biology. Earth science, another certification. Chemistry, another certification. Physics, another certification. Our AP history teacher has never taken an American history class. She's a European, where she was. She's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in our social sciences too, we have to get rid of the 7 through 12 certification. I think if you're going to teach American history, you should probably have enough credits to get a certification in American history. I think they should treat all the subjects like they treat science. And, you're not necessarily going to get the best, right? So you're not going to get McCullough or McAuliffe teaching high school high school American history, but you're going to get someone who's read them, and understands them and stuff. I think that's where education has to go. That's just my personal opinion.
So would you say, well, first of all, I love the idea of struggle. Like, I think kids respond to struggling too. When they see the teacher kind of struggling and making mistakes, I think I have a fear of public speaking, but not in the classroom.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
I'm the same exact way.
Well, maybe I was trying to figure out why. I wonder if that's the same reason for you. It took me a long time to figure out why. And then what I realized was teenagers are harsh, they're brutal, but if you show vulnerability, they are quick to be there for you and embrace you and stuff, because they're all really dealing with their own stuff. So what I realized is, like, if I trip or I have a bug hanging or something like that, or schmutz in my face, then they'll laugh, and then I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed, I'm sorry. And then they're like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, they're like more forgiving. So that could be like a little bit more of like a safety net, I guess.
Yeah, I always tell my students they're smarter than me.
Yeah.
I'm like, listen, dude, if I can get a master's degree, who knows where you can go? I always say, it's probably politically incorrect. Said Polish kid from a bad school district with dyslexia, and I got a master's degree. Yeah. Just think how far you'll go. But that, again, a sense of vulnerability. They'll ask me a question. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you don't know. You're the teacher.
Right. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I don't. Let's go. Hop online. Let's figure it out. Yeah.
That's what school is.
And right? Yeah. I'm not an expert on everything. I said if I was, I'd probably be operating on somebody right now instead of like making sure you're operating.
Well, yeah. I mean, that'd be kind of unfortunate. I mean, I think that, like, maybe moving away from the requirements that, maybe when you make all these requirements to get in the classroom, you have to do blah, 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 blah. maybe, but what if you have those abilities? Like I watched for the first
Right.
time, which is crazy. I watched Catch Me If You Can for the first time ever last night. And at the end, he ends up working for the FBI because he was this con man, Frank Abagnale, and he was this con man, and he didn't have the degrees. They just handed him a job, like a lot of hackers. It's like, you can go to prison for 30 years or work for us and get a six-figure salary, and like we have to, when we have I get the point of we need to have people with these degrees and stuff. I get it. I mean, you don't want idiots in there who don't know what they're talking about, but let's think our way through this a little bit when there is like a hard no, because I know I have several students who went to the LAPD, did all the tests, everything, but then they admitted that they smoked weed, and they're like, no, you can't come in here. And that's happened twice. The two students that I know said that they, one kid was like, yeah, I experimented with drugs in high school, and they were like, no, you can't be a part of us. And the other kid was just like, took a polygraph or something and said that he smoked weed and he wasn't allowed in. It's like that's your line. That's your line. This guy is just, now you have people who don't know anything about drug culture enforcing drugs. There's just, we're not thinking our way through this, I guess, would be the theme for everything we've talked about today. So
it's funny what you said about that. I had a friend that happened to, right? And then I had a friend who lied and got on, right? He got on. And this is, my grandfather was a cop, right? So I'm named after my both grandfathers. So he was a cop a long time ago. He's badge number 840 in New York City. That means he was the 840th cop ever in New York City history.
What years?
And he retired in the 60s, right? So, my grandmother was like 19. He was like almost 40 when they got married. So he was old when I was a young kid. But there's something neat about having a really, really old grandfather, because you learn a lot if you listen to him. Mm-hmm. And he always used to say that they're looking for angels, but all they're going to get is diabolical angels. So, right. So the guy who said, you know what? Yeah, I smoked dope when I was a kid. That's an angel. Guy's being honest. And you do know what drew you there. You're a good person now. Why? And today, smoking dope is no big deal. But, I just look back at some of the things that I did as a kid. I would never admit them publicly or, tell them to my kid, but I've learned from them. It does make you better. So that was his concern, and he used to tell me these things as a kid. Here's another thing I find interesting that's different about policing too. Granted, he retired in the 60s, right? So he wasn't trained to use his handgun. My uncle used to tell me stories on how my grandfather used to put a helmet at the edge of his driveway. And in Brooklyn, they have long driveways because people share them. And then you split off and you have different garages. He used to practice with his billy club, throwing his billy club, different angles, and bouncing them and hitting the target. And he said what cops used to do is the billy club wasn't to control the crowd. It was to trip the person running away. He used to hit people in the back of the legs. His use of a handgun was so limited. Now he was in Brooklyn. It wasn't like he was, like in
small town Wisconsin or something. Yeah.
And the 60s were still the 60s. He used to pawn off his gun because, he had a big Irish family, and, he got paid every month. And when money got tight, he would pawn off his gun and just walk around with a black sock in his pocket, because he knew he didn't have to do it. He knew how to get out of a situation or whatever. So yeah, I think there's a reevaluating of everything, right? I guess maybe that's what we could talk about, is how we teaching kids how to fail, maybe reviewing how we train police officers and stuff like that, reviewing how we select and pick teachers. I think everything needs to kind of be on the table right now, because obviously, people are angry and people don't feel like they're being heard, and they're asking for some things that I don't know if they're conceivable, but we got to do something because it's getting pretty ugly across the board.
Yeah, maybe this
everywhere.
I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up. Is 2020 you could look back and go, that was the worst year, or you could say that was the year that things changed. That was the year that we didn't know at the time, but that's what was the catalyst that needed to fix these institutions. Going from that in the 1960s, 60 years later, we have, or 70 years later, whatever it is, 60 is now we have armored personnel carriers and tanks and stuff like that. So we've lost our way. Teachers, we've lost our way. It's politics, we've lost our way. And maybe this is the time to try and think our way through this, reevaluate. I like that, and just have these discussions about, just like you and I are having with each other, of what can we do? What can we do? Like, and I don't mean that as far as like, all right, it's on you, people in power. It's like, you individuals, what is going to be your role in trying to facilitate this? And I think because I'm a teacher and you're a teacher, is part of what we do is like, here's the information, here's this, I'll help you in any way I can. Go, you do it,
Mm-hmm.
go. And that's, I think that's kind of what it would be a real shame to lose this opportunity, because it just seems like it's gonna get worse until we fix it and make it better.
Yeah, and not to make this a religious thing, but my favorite line from the Bible is stop looking at the speck in somebody else's eye when you have a board in your own.
Yeah.
I think the first thing you have to, and so a lot of us, you and I were doing this, is what other teachers should do and stuff. But I think what makes you a good teacher is you probably every day try to think of how you could have done your lesson better, how you could have reached out to a student better. And I think the majority of teachers do that. I think the teachers that give teachers a bad rep are the teachers that have given up reevaluating themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have to kind of start reevaluating themselves, right? And it's kind of hard to do, especially when you feel marginalized. It's very hard to do. But I think the message for 2020 is pretty simple and clear. We need to refocus. We need to be looking at things with 2020 vision. And I think for the longest time,
I
know, I was press secretary. That's my spin. That's my spin. But for the longest time, we really haven't. And we really need to get back to 2020 vision.
Yeah.
So after this year and beyond, we're all seeing clearly again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing that. Are you still active on your blog and stuff?
Yeah, I have a blog. It's called corporationu.com. I really haven't been that active since the pandemic hit, just because teaching has so changed. Like, that has become my internet release. And so I've kind of stepped back. I've also been working on a project for almost 15 years now. It was a faith-based play called Faith Ties. I wrote it as a screenplay. We just recently did a social distancing version of it because it was supposed to be produced this year. So I actually stole that 2020 line for there, because there was a funny line. One of the main themes of this play was the homeless guy, and there's a character that approaches him. He keeps on telling him his lenses are blurry, and the guy never got it because he doesn't have glasses. He doesn't know why this person was telling him his lenses were blurry. On New Year's Day, I contacted the person that I kind of co-created this with, Rusty Proctor. I'm like, this is our year, man, 2020. And he didn't get it at first. And then he was like, oh, your lenses are, and I texted him back, your lenses are blurry. I still don't get it. Your lenses are still blurry.
Yeah.
And he finally got it. So if you go to faithties.com, there's a place that you could actually watch some of the interviews with some of the actors. We have a GoFundMe page where we're trying to break it down into episodes. And if there was ever a year that this play or screenplay had a message for, it is definitely this year. It's a lot about social justice and about people just trying to make a difference.
Awesome.
So thank you for that opportunity to promote that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll put it in the show notes and things like that.
Yeah.
So, Jim, thank you. I'm sure we'll talk on the phone, shortly, and I appreciate this, and I'm glad that I got to kind of expose you publicly to my audience, which is, growing. And I appreciate everyone who listens and took the time to listen. And thank you guys very much. Go, stay safe out there. Okay, guys. All right. This has been Cylinder Radio. The success of this podcast and the educational revolution that I hope you will be a part of is dependent on those who find value in it. Please take a few moments to review us on iTunes so the show is more easily found. If there was a perspective on today's topic that was not highlighted in this episode, or you have an idea for an episode topic that you want to understand more deeply, please email us at cylinderradio@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram @WillRusch. WILLREUSCH. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next one.